Hi. Welcome to That Saturday Show. I'm your host, Tom Dent. It's beginning of March, and it really has come in like a lion. These winds are absolutely incredible. We do have a jam-packed show for you tonight. Of course, That Saturday Show is brought to you by the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice at 202 Harvard Southeast, where we strive to create a world that's nuclear, military-free, equality for all, and a livable environment for everybody. And last week, I know you guys on Comcast and Public Access probably saw a repeat. We were trying to get a podcast that we made in on time. So a lot of people that checked into our YouTube channel and on Facebook saw the podcast. And we talked about a very important bill in at the state legislature right now called House Bill 12. If you want to know more about that in detail with Mariel Nananzi of New Energy Economy and Alejandra Lyons from No False Solutions, go to our YouTube page and watch that podcast/video, and it also had a song by Matt Johns. Yeah, so we thought we were going to do a podcast today because I couldn't find another important guest. So I wasn't really prepared, but fortunately I have my Quad Shot Americano from Michael Thomas Coffee, which is a business sponsor of the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice. We've got all sorts of things going on today on the show. Our most important thing is that I went with a bunch of local activists for police reform and against police shootings, murders, and excessive force to the mayor's office on Tuesday. And we went up to the 11th floor and we demanded a meeting with Tim Keller and Chief Harold Medina because there's fairly strong rumors that Dominic Perez, who was one of the two people that executed James Boyd almost 9 years ago, was going to be moved from, he's still in APD, he was never fired even though Sandia and Perez were let go in a mistrial sort of, but Perez continued on APD and he was a range instructor, and now he's kind of climbing back into being a SWAT team trainer at the academy. And we don't want Dominic Perez anywhere near SWAT. We don't want him to carry a weapon again. And you'll see all this. We were filmed by, we had Channel 4 and Channel 13, and you'll see those clips. I'll be showing that a little bit later. We have two great songs from Blind Drive. We have Semblance and Rendezvous, and I'll talk a little bit more about Blind Drive, who I've known for years. They're a great group. After we talk about what we did at the mayor's office and what's coming up, we were successful. We are going to have a meeting with the mayor on the 9th at about 3:30. But joining me on the program later is Bill Tidwall. He is the president of our local chapter of Veterans for Peace, and he's going to be announcing, going to be talking about the Unity March that takes place tomorrow at Morningside Park. And there's going to be all sorts of groups joining them. The Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice is there, PSL, Stop the War Machine, a bunch of different people. There's going to be all sorts of events and singers and stuff like that. But I'll let Bill talk about that when he gets on. So, remember, a lot of what I'm saying here is my opinion, not necessarily reflecting the views of the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, but I know they're very concerned about environmental issues like House Bill 12. The one thing I personally want to get off my chest right now is this crazy stacked Supreme Court that is now hearing, well, they're going back and hearing about Biden's executive order to relieve a large amount of student debt, and there's a lot of students and people that owe student debts that have signed up for this, for the relief, and it takes the burden off students, it puts money back into the economy, it trains students to have degrees at lower cost so they can contribute later to society. But the Supreme Court is using something crazy in Amendment 3 in the judicial to try to throw this back to Congress. And we know that the Supreme Court's been a little bit stacked, and now a certain political side has taken over the House, so it's not a really good idea to throw this back, and there's all sorts of legal ramifications and convolutions. Apparently there's this judge appointed by the former president in Texas who basically controls the 5th District Court that shoots all this legislation up to the Supreme Court, including Roe v. Wade that happened before. So this bears keeping an eye on. It's a very important issue. What we've been doing up at the Supreme Court, aside from keeping our eyes on these very important environmental bills, Susie, our associate director, took our interns up to the state legislature this week to there's a bill there to create restorative justice throughout the state, and the Peace Center is becoming the leading, one of the leading programs in the state on restorative justice going into the schools and communities. And they're also keeping an eye on a bill that's called the Office of Peace Building, I believe, and it's House Bill 171, and we're very interested in that. So it's a very interesting project, and it's gotten through a couple of House committees before. So that bill might actually become a reality. So on our last program that we had our podcast on, they were talking about House Bill 12, and House Bill 12 is kind of like a horrible bill for New Mexico. It allows private partnerships and talks about advanced energy technologies, but it's basically turning over control of the state to the oil and gas and extractive industry. So it's a very dangerous bill. Fortunately, in the meantime, this bill was tabled, but that doesn't mean it's going to totally go away. It can come back in different forms, and it is coming back in different forms. It's on the podcast, I mentioned that our governor in her inaugural fund was given close to $90,000 by the oil and gas industries. And one of the key members on that committee is a gentleman named Nathan Smalls. The strange thing about Nathan Smalls is that he's also the chair of the House Appropriations and Finance Committee, and Margaret Dixon is a co-chair. And what they've done is they've taken like $50 million in allocations for House Bill 12, and they put it on House Bill 2. And it's way in the back of House Bill 2. It's on page 196, and it basically it's matching funds with the federal government's program. And this is a crazy program, but I believe it's in Biden's infrastructure bill to set up hydrogen hubs around the country, and there's a number of them going to be set up in New Mexico. And so the $50 million is important because it's set up for matching funds of $50 million for the federal government on this. And to some degree, the private partnerships have been calmed down, but it's popping up in other bills too. Like there's an oil and gas bill that is doing sort of what the private partnership bills are doing. It's dumbing down seriously regulations on the oil and gas and extractive industries. So we found out about how this has all changed in the state legislature from our friend Paul Gibson. Him and his wife run Retake Our Democracy up in Santa Fe. And what he says here is, in his last blog, is no matter how often the legislature says no, hydrogen activists or advocates find ways to circumvent the process and continue this work. So they were very happy that House Bill 12 was tabled, but then he says, I was tipped off that buried on page 196 of House Bill 2, the overall House budget, there was an allocation of $20 million for public-private partnerships to seek matching federal funds for advanced energy projects. So we definitely have to knock that out of House Bill 2 if that's possible. But that committee actually writes its own legislation, so that's passed through in the budget, and that's not subject to a floor vote in the House or the Senate. So we need to keep an eye on that. You need to go to legis.gov. You need to go to legislative hotline, find out who's on the committee, make phone calls, write emails as quickly as possible. Let me see. I've got all sorts of stuff here. Let me see if I can find the thing about the oil and gas bill. That's not it. I've got a whole bunch of stuff in my email that people keep sending me about everything that's going on there. Let's see. Okay, here it is. There's another bill called what New Energy Economy is sending me is that House bill is rolled, but there's Senate Bill 52, which is being heard right now, which is no to Holtec and the people that want to bring tons of nuclear waste and store it or bury it in New Mexico. The oil and gas bill that's up there, along with fracking, I mean, it costs up to 160 million gallons of New Mexico water every day. So if you can find the oil and gas bill in the House, find that and look at that, because it basically puts the private partnerships back in wastewater and helps the hydrogen energy thing. And studies have shown that green or blue hydrogen, they waste tons of water and they basically create no energy at all. So we've been keeping close watch on everything that's going on in the legislature, and anybody who follows the legislature knows that this is a big convoluted process and there's sneaky ways to get things back in, and there's a possibility that they might revive House Bill 12 at the end. But let me get into the gist of what we're going to be covering on this program. So like I mentioned before, on Tuesday, myself, Samson Costales, who's a 22-year-old retired Albuquerque police officer, who is coming out with a book called A True Shade of Blue, which is a cop's journey exposing police corruptions. And he was a whistleblower with APD and got into a lot of trouble, but fortunately got out with his pension. But he was a very cool cop. He refused to get involved in heavy-duty situations or fire a shot in any type of police incident. So we went up to the 11th floor. We talked to the mayor's liaison. They're setting up a meeting to talk to us on the 9th, and we had two TV stations covering us up there. We had Channel 4 and Channel 13, and we were on the news on Tuesday night at 5:30 and 6, and there was reports on Wednesday morning. But going back to the fact, we've talked about this on the program before, that we've looked at a locker room or a small cadre of corrupt cops in APD, and Samson comes right out and says that, I can guarantee you that 98 to 99% of all the cops on APD are dirty. And let's go back in a little bit of history. We know that at least since 2010 to 2014, there have been at least 24 questionable murders or killings by cops of mentally challenged and possibly innocent people. This goes way back in the history of APD. For instance, back during the social unrest days, 69, early 70s, you know about the Black Panthers and all that, but there was a Chicano movement of kind of militant, feed the hood, protect our community groups that were called the Brown Berets. And then they were reformed in New Mexico in the early 70s by Richard Moore of Los Jardines and other Chicano community activists. That's what they called themselves back then. And the local authorities didn't really dig them at all. There were fusion centers set up between Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department, Albuquerque Police Department, the state police, and they were tipped off to a lot of what these guys were doing by different kind of white Aryan sources, like the John Birch Society and other people here in New Mexico. And not that much has changed, especially with white supremacy groups and churches, mega churches like Legacy, and forming and helping militias like what we saw at the Don Juan Diernate protest, where Scott Williams was shot 4 times in the back by Stephen Baca. And Harold Medina, talking about meeting with Harold Medina, it's on paper that he murdered a 14-year-old in a church. He was responsible for the operation that ended up with the death of Ken Ellis III. He was responsible for the police response or non-response at the Don Juan Diernate protest. And back in 1972, 2 members of the Black Berets, Rito Canales and Antonio Cordova, were taken out to the west side and executed by APD. And strange things happened to 2 members, Bobby Garcia and Tommy Valles. And like I said, I was even part of a class action suit in 1985 where I was trying to break up a fight, and then I got the crap beaten out of me by APD, and they hog-tied me and had weightlifting contests 3 times with me on the way to the police station. And there's at least 20 people that they did that to, and probably 40 more. So there's always been a kind of cowboy mentality. And we've worked with a consent decree. A number of us who are up there at the 11th floor, we've gone to Civilian Police Academy. We've served on the Southeast Area Community Policing Council, trying to work with the consent decree and trying to do our best to try to keep APD in check for what they've been doing. So what we're first going to show with this is my engineer Lloyd filmed a lot of what was going on the 11th floor, and they're interviewing Samson Costellas, and then I'll talk a little bit about the clips that we're going to show from Channel 4 and Channel 13. So let's see the 11th floor footage.
I received some information from a good source that Dominic Perez, who'd been working as a range instructor for the past 8 years, was now going to be transferred to SWAT. And that concerned me because he came from SWAT. And with that information, I also received that he was going to be going out on all SWAT call-outs. So my question would be to the chief and to the mayor, is he going to have a SWAT vehicle? How is he going to be equipped? How is he going to be uniformed? Is he going to be simply a consultant? What is his role in doing that? And the reason we're curious and the reason we're suspicious about this is because Sandia, his cohort, who also was involved in killing James Boyd, we're suspicious when they say they're going to put someone somewhere in this capacity. What capacity, and will they eventually sneak him into an armed and badged capacity?
First of all, when we were promised that when he was hired, that he would only be given a desk job.
I understand your concern, and you want to, just to make sure I'm hearing you guys, you want a meeting with Chief Medina and Mayor Keller to talk about his transfer from a desk job to a training consultant with SWAT. And in regards to the shooting with James Boyd.
I have other issues regarding what's going on. First of all, it's It's very strange that Mr. Dominic Perez was even rehired in the first place. He was not found innocent. It was a hung jury. He was not found innocent. He was not found guilty, but not innocent. So why is the city why did the city give this guy back pay? Why were they determined to rehire him?
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing is in question, and even worse, because this is being done. All of the human and civil rights that we worked for and that the city said they were working for with the DOJ are back in question. What in the heck's going on with the Police Oversight Commission? We understand it's totally dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
All of these issues are back on the table.
Yeah.
Okay, unfortunately, because, hey, what's going on? This is really off, really bad.
I hear your concern.
Perez cost the city $5 million.
So
And with
those,
this police oversight committee, they're an independent board, and the city council wants them, so
it's
we
back
don't
on the
touch
table.
them.
It's back on the table because the mayor, the whole city council, everything, nothing's done without the mayor, we know that.
Well, this
So
one is
as-
independent.
Well, it's not completely independent. It was created by the city council. The mayor had to sign that bill into law. So we're back to square one, unfortunately. What's going on with the city, there probably needs to be a complete assessment.
Mhm.
As a consultant for the SWAT team.
No,
Someone would you like?
that's not
It's
accurate.
not accurate. And we came here to the mayor's office today because we heard that Dominic Perez was being transferred from working on the range to being a consultant with SWAT. And he started out with SWAT before he was put on the repeat offenders program that killed James Boyd in the foothills with Keith Sandy, and it's our opinion that he shouldn't have even been left on the police force. He should have been let go, or at least put behind a desk and nowhere near a weapon again. And even though Mr. Gallegos may have been saying this stuff, I'm not sure we totally believe him. And this guy should be close to a gun or an intense situation.
If you guys want to,
If you want
So you're afraid to have us hear you?
No,
Come on.
you were just standing there. I just asked you to get out
This
of my
is-
line of sight
is this-
because you're trying to intimidate me.
No, we're not trying to
Andres.
intimidate.
And that's probably going to take place in 2 weeks or so. But like I said before, from what we've heard, Keith Sandy is a real estate agent in the East Mountains. And within 10 to 15 feet, they shot him in the back and killed him. And, apparently he had little pen knives. But those rocks up there were so huge that if you charge somebody, it's going to trip on
I
them.
think we're making, sat down, met with the scheduler, we kind of went through, looked at any times that we found. I found a 30-minute time slot on March 9th, if that works for you guys, from 3:30 to 4, with the mayor.
So you'll hear this information being repeated in the two different TV interviews. A couple of interesting things that happened was they knew that we were coming. I posted this on Facebook on Tuesday night, and one of our activists was actually stopped by the cops on his way down, and I picked up the phone to say, we're here to talk to the mayor's office. And before I could even do that, they go like, "Oh, you're with the protest," and Mr. Gilbert Gallegos, who's the public information officer of APD, he knew about it before we were even there. When we were talking and setting things up, all of a sudden the elevator opened up and there was 2 cops and they had big old flak jackets. And then 2 seconds later, Gilbert popped up and he was all hot and bothered, saying like, "Oh no, you got this all wrong." Before I lead into the Channel 4 clip, I just want to say that remember that, like I said on another program, these guys were assigned to the Repeat Offenders Squad, which was kind of like a cowboy squad, like the Scorpio Squad in Memphis turned into, about that beat Kyrie to death. And another interesting tidbit that gets lost in the shuffle, and this has been verified by a few other sources, is that I think it was Dominic Perez's birthday that day, and somebody tossed him a rifle and said, "Happy birthday," and off he went to the foothills. But anyway, let's go to the KOB report, and let's go to Channel 4.
Eyewitness News 4 at 6.
It was a night that just shocked and rocked Albuquerque. Nearly 9 years later, though, the fallout from the deadly police shooting of James Boyd is still felt today. Boyd was a homeless camper in the foothills and the latest victim in a long series of controversial police shootings at the time. Protests erupted against the Albuquerque Police Department, and the city's police force would never be the same after the Department of Justice swept in to enforce a series of reforms weeks later. And while the DOJ has noted progress, the Boyd case is once again causing controversy within the Albuquerque Police Department, this time over one of the officers involved. You see, 2 officers were charged with murder in Boyd's death, but the case ended in a mistrial, and the DA eventually dropped charges. One of those officers, though, is reportedly getting a new job, and that is raising eyebrows. Tamara Lopez was there as local activists brought their concerns straight to City Hall today. So, Tamara, what's the message here?
Tessa, they're concerned about Perez's new position because they think it could potentially lead to situations like the one Perez was in back in 2014.
I want a meeting with Chief Medina and Mayor Keller.
Tuesday morning, a group of protesters came to City Hall demanding to speak with Mayor Tim Keller and APD Chief Harold Medina.
I understand some questions were raised about Officer Perez's employment with APD. He recently took a position with the training academy dealing with training of the tactical units within APD. For the past 8 years, he's been in a similar position in training with a different unit.
Officer Dominic Perez was initially fired for this controversial shooting of James Boyd back in 2014, then reinstated at APD following a hung jury. But the protest group says the rehiring should never have happened.
It's our opinion that he shouldn't have even been left on the police force. He should have been let go, or at least put behind a desk and nowhere near a weapon again.
APD spokesperson Gilbert Gallego says Perez's position change is not cause for concern.
Not really anything different than he's been doing for the past 8 years. There's no involvement with the public. He does not go out on any calls for service. He's strictly working in a training capacity.
But protesters question why someone with Perez's past is allowed to train new officers.
He's been training officers for the last 8 years, and there have been no problems whatsoever. He doesn't interact with the public. He doesn't go out on calls.
APD has been under DOJ oversight for the past 8 years.
They've been slow and incremental changes that really haven't solved anything. And I think without the DOJ oversight, they're going back to where they were before.
Gallego says APD has made major changes in that time, and the group remains hopeful. The mayor has agreed to meet with them next week.
Optimistic that we get to meet with them and we'll sit down and give them our concerns and to let them know that we're not going to go away and we're not going to stop.
Gallego says that Perez had to test into this new position, and he had the highest test score out of the bunch, so he was the most qualified for the position. Back to you.
Well, yeah, I'd say maybe incremental changes, not major changes with a consent decree, but anyway. So in our, we'll switch to Channel 13, and you know, it's the opinion of many activists and people in the community that Keith Sandia and Dominic Perez should be spending a long time in prison instead of being out and about. And there's rumors that Keith Sandia is selling real estate in the East Mountains. But now let's go to the Channel 13 report.
Good evening. A group of well-known APD critics crashed the mayor's office today to protest an officer who was fired and rehired after the notorious shooting of a homeless man in the foothills. They're upset Dominic Perez is working with the SWAT team. Here's News 13's Ariana Kraft with the story.
It was tense this morning in the lobby of the mayor's office as that small group of protesters showed up demanding to know why Dominic Perez isn't still on desk duty.
So you're afraid to have us hear you? Come on,
You were
what's
just
up?
standing there. I just asked you to get out of my line of sight because you're trying to intimidate.
No, we're not trying to
Congress.
intimidate. Well,
You guys want the interview?
look,
Things got testy this morning outside the mayor's office. 4 or 5 protesters camping out in the lobby, waiting to ask why Dominic Perez, one of the APD officers fired after murder charges were filed in the shooting death of homeless man James Boyd in 2014, still has a job.
Get on the ground now! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Don't make noise! Put up!
The shooting sparked protests and the firing of SWAT team members Perez and Keith Sandy. But Perez was reinstated under Mayor R.J. Berry in 2017 after his murder trial ended in a hung jury.
It's very strange that Mr. Dominic Perez was even rehired in the first place. He was not found innocent. It was a hung jury. He was not found innocent. He was not found guilty, but not innocent.
Activists say they're concerned with Perez's job duties at the department.
It lets them know that the person who is capable of shooting a man in the back is going to be allowed to oversee or maybe offer some consulting advice to various SWAT members on how to shoot people. That's what we're concerned about.
According to APD, Perez recently moved from a job as an instructor at the firearms range to a position at the police academy.
Very similar, it's in a training position, but it's training the tactical units specifically. So SWAT, bomb squad, EOD, our K9 unit. So he's doing that kind of specific training, which is part of his background.
APD says Perez's duties do not involve taking calls or dealing with the public.
I think that's something that the AP leadership over the past few chiefs have been cognizant of, and that's still the case here. So nothing's really changed at all.
The mayor's office has scheduled a meeting to discuss these concerns on March 9th. Ariana Kraft, KRQE News 13.
As part of his reinstatement, Perez had to complete the department's training required by the DOJ. He also received 2 years of back pay.
Let me do a little blurb about what's happening with the Walmart up on San Mateo and Zuni. I know a lot of people were sad that they're shut down, and that serves a lot of the needs of the International District and people that have trouble in transportation getting back and forth to grocery stores and other stores. So it's a pretty big deal. I know that the International District Community Health has been working on it. Enrique Cardiel and other people have been setting up meetings to see what they can do for the community. But some good news is happening at the state legislature about that, and with the city of Albuquerque. The city and the state are trying to put up some matching funds, at least. State Senator Antoinette Cedillo Lopez and State Representative Janelle Ananoyu have both secured $1 million each to help purchase the old Walmart Supercenter, and they're looking to set up stores and grocery outlets and follow that. It's a very important community project in the International District, and there's good hope for that. What's coming up next is one of my favorite groups for about 12 years ago. Their name is Blind Drive. And if you know the heavy metal group Disturbed, they sort of follow in the footsteps. They're a little bit like that. And what's interesting, the connection with this studio here, Studio 519 Public Access, is I found out about them through a group that was called Music Unite that was actually putting programs on Channel 26 and Channel 27 Public Access over 12 years ago. And they're backed by Mysterion Records, and Music Unite was kind of a cool show for a while. Swami Rob of 94 Rock interviewed a lot of the local bands here. And this is one of the better bands. I know Robert and James. And the first song that we're going to be playing is called Semblance. And we're going to be ending the show with their song Rendezvous. And after the show, we'll be on with Bill Tidwall.
Vision goes down, your state of mind. Nobody knows when it's time. Chasing a dream that's too far away, but hiding the truth where there's clarity. Feeling your hurt, your guilt inside, looking for guidance from the sky. All your faces are too plain, just like a mountain to the flame. The mask you wear that won't ever. The way you feel it down. Faces are too plain, just like a mountain to the flame. The mask you wear that won't ever. Life is crazy if you make. It could be something you could break. Vision gone so dark and cold. These faces will not take control. Chasing a dream that's too far away, but hiding the truth with each every take. Feeling your hurt, your guilt inside, looking for guidance from the sky. All your faces are too plain, just like a mountain to the flame. The mask you wear that won't ever. The way you feel it down. Faces are too plain, just like a mountain to the flame. The mask you wear that won't ever. The way you feel it down. Faces where they hide your pain, leaves will turn to rain. Vision grows so dark and cold. Faces where I take control. Chasing the dream that's too far away, hiding the truth where it's reality. Feeling your hurt, your guilt inside, looking for guidance from the sky. All your faces are too plain, just like a mountain to the flame. The mask you wear that won't ever. The way you feel it down. Faces are too plain, just like a mountain to the flame. The mask you wear that won't ever. The way you feel it down.
I love that band, but I'm a heavy metal freak. I'm all sorts of music freak. Joining me right now, we've got Bill Tidwall of Veterans for Peace, the local Albuquerque chapter. And Bill, why don't you let us in on what's going on tomorrow? This starts at what, 12:45 at Morningside Park?
Yes, it's the Unite March for Life, Love, and Nuclear Disarmament, Nuclear Abolition. And we're going to have the Raging Grannies sing, and we'll have speakers from the Party for Socialism and Liberation, from IDUST, which is an anti-nuclear group, and from DNA, Disarm Nuclear and Abolition. And we'll be talking about a whole number of issues. One of the most important ones in New Mexico is the fact that the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act needs to be addressed by the Congress. The president supports it, but the Congress needs to get on board and include New Mexicans, Pacific Islanders, and others who've been affected by the most intense radiations from nuclear weapons tests, from mining and milling uranium.
Wow. Well, I know that New Mexico is a hotbed for nuclear waste and nuclear development right now. expanding weapons programs at Los Alamos. They're establishing plutonium pits. Holtec and other places around the country are trying to ship in all the nuclear waste around the country. So that's an incredibly important issue. So tell us a little bit more about the march. Are you staying at Morningside Park, or are you marching, or what?
We'll stay at Morningside Park until just before 2 p.m. on Sunday. We'll be singing, there'll be speeches, and then we'll begin the march from there and head up Zuni at east, and there'll be places to stop along the way for potty breaks, for a snack at the gas stations along the way. We'll turn south on Louisiana Boulevard, and we'll proceed to march past the Veterans Memorial Park, and then end up short time later at the gate of the Sandia Weapons Lab, where the very nuclear weapons are planned and designed for development at Los Alamos and other sites in the country. And at the gate of the Sandia Weapons Lab at Louisiana and Gibson, we will have a little more singing, and we'll have a couple of brief speeches, and then everyone will go home. But that 3-mile march will ingrain in everybody involved how terrible it is that New Mexico is the center, really, of the nation, and thus of the world's nuclear weapons program.
And with, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful states or areas in the country or the world. I've even heard, people were saying, like, when they were first putting the roads in here, there was a huge quantity of uranium in the asphalt.
That may very well be. There are over 500 abandoned uranium mines in New Mexico. The people who worked those mines were, for the most part, indigenous folks, and they suffered the effects of this radiation that we're talking about, that the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act needs to provide assistance, medical assistance to those folks. Those folks mined and milled that uranium for years, and we have reason to know that they are going to be asked to be mining again.
God. Well, when I first got into town in the early 80s, I was working for New Mexico Public Interest Research Group, and we did a lot of work with Southwest Research and Information Center. And I think one of the guys that sat on this and provided a lot of the initial information to people is a guy named Don Hancock, and he told me about this one, I believe, a Navajo gentleman named Bobby Yazzie, who wandered into a pond, but it was actually uranium holding pond, and he was burned from the waist down and quickly died from that. And who was that? Was that Kier McGee or Union Carbide was responsible for that pond?
There were so many people that got involved to make money on uranium mining and milling. And what they did was, once they had made their money, they folded their company. And these people that worked and the people in the surrounding areas continued to suffer from the mining and milling, the dust. Actually, here in New Mexico,
right, we've had the downwinders on this program, and they've explained a lot of the fallout from the Trinity site explosion.
Yes, those people have been neglected. When that Trinity bomb exploded on July 16th, I believe it was, 1945, no one was really notified in New Mexico. It was a pretty big surprise because it was a very, very bright flash. Did you know that should we have a nuclear war, our weapons, our MIRV missiles, largely, that will come from, the most effective weapons will come from the ocean, will come from our submarines.
Right. When I was in the Navy, I was an anti-submarine warfare operator, and they talked about the class of submarines back then, like the Nautilus and the new ones that house Polaris missiles, they said the Titan submarines, they'd have like 16 silos in there, and any one missile that was sent off could split off 4 ways and damage most of Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, and Boston.
Well, we have those missiles to destroy
Really?
Perceived enemies of the United States, China, Russia, and there may be more, North Korea. Let's talk a little bit about the Sarmat missile, which is also called the Satan missile, that Russia has. This weapon was just successfully put into place a few years ago. When the Sarmat missile reaches Albuquerque, and Albuquerque is a prime target, it released either 10 large MIRV missiles or 15 slightly smaller MIRV missiles. The weapon in each of these missiles, when it detonates, will reach a temperature of nearly 180 million degrees.
Sounds like the sun.
Within 1 second. It's actually hotter than the sun.
Jeez.
And that heat will destroy Albuquerque and the Kirtland Air Force Base and the Sandia Weapons Lab immediately.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be no time.
Well, we were marked as ground zero for a long time because of our nuclear research. And one tale I say, I don't know how to do this quickly, but back in '79, it's like 80% of our military intelligence went to Los Alamos. You know the radio telescopes of the very large array that goes on forever? There's one up in Los Alamos, and if the enemy took that out back then, it would wipe out intelligence communications all over the world.
I'm not surprised. These Sarmat missiles will also go to Los Alamos. New Mexico, the heat from all of those MIRV missiles coming out of the Sarmat Satan missile will essentially turn all of the wood in every building and house in New Mexico into ash. Can you imagine what it'll do to the people and the animals?
Yeah, but supposedly we have NORAD and SAC and all sorts of fighter jets and things like that to deter that from ever happening. Who knows? Bill, you're now secretary of the local chapter of Veterans for Peace. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of Veterans for Peace?
Yes, I'd be glad to, but I want to back up for just a minute. There is no defense in a nuclear war. We will. New Mexico, Denver, Colorado, New York City, Omaha, Nebraska, they'll all be totally destroyed.
Well, I think the whole world will be.
And our infrastructure will be totally destroyed. The people who don't die immediately will die from not having food, will die from radiation, will die from a nuclear winter.
Well, what was the 68 poster? One nuclear bomb can ruin your whole day. But tell us what's going on with local Veterans for Peace.
Well, we have a lot of issues. Like I said, the Radiation
We only have a couple of minutes left.
Exposure Compensation Act. We're working on the fact that Los Alamos is making the pits for new nuclear weapons. $2 to $3 trillion will be spent doing that in Los Alamos and at the Sandia labs and around the country. We're working on the Holtec issue, where all of the nuclear waste from power generation, electric power generation, is aimed at New Mexico. We're working on WIP, which is the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. All of the defense-related nuclear waste, all the offense-related nuclear waste is aimed at WIP. We're working on the uranium mining and milling concerns.
And if you're a veteran, if you want to become a veteran for peace, join. They're a PAJOLA group, a peace and justice organization linking arms at the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice. You can call the center, ask for Bob Anderson's number, ask for Bill's number, or we'll find a way to put you in touch with them.
And importantly, The Veterans for Peace has associate members, and I am an associate member. And associate members do not have to be veterans, and they are welcomed into the group.
Right. Yeah, I know Ravi and some other people have been members of the local chapter for a long time, and they're kind of associate members. So this is the Donald and Sally Alice Albuquerque chapter for Veterans for Peace. And how many years has it been going?
It's been going on since about 1990.
And Veterans for Peace is not just a local group, it's national and international. There's a lot of people involved.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are.
All right, well, that's wrapping up that Saturday show. And just to give you my quote on my Facebook page and one of the mottos of the Peace and Justice Center, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. And I bet you can't guess who said that. That was Jimi Hendrix. We'll see you next week on that Saturday show. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you so much, Tom.
So if you've enjoyed our music this morning and you're a big fan of Blind Drive, they are playing tonight at the Launchpad March 4th with Anesthesia. The doors open at 8 o'clock and tickets are just $10. You can't beat that.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real, 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to that Saturday show.